1 Samuel chapter 21. Last week, and this gets really interesting, and I don't know where you were on the whole, like part of the thesis last week was I was telling you it's never okay to lie. There's different people tell you they can be wrong. It's fine. But situational ethics is really dangerous. Oh. Oh, no. We were talking bad about Kids World, yes. But David is this really complex character. Like, there's part of David that's an absolute hero, right? I mean, probably no one in this room or no one you've ever met would be like, I'm more spiritual than David. Right? If someone said that, you'd be like, whoa. So, I mean, David is this character that you're trying to kind of get to, right? Like in a spiritual scale, David's up there, right? And he has these amazing moments. And then there's this struggle in David that is so like, makes me feel a bit bitter about myself. Because there's a struggle in David, there's this struggle to do the right thing, but he's a man after God's own heart. There's a lot of positive, and it's just our race, right? It's just what we find ourselves in. As I look at my own life, there are things that I'm really good at. There are things that I feel comfortable at. There are scriptures that I love because I'm good at that. And then there's the opposite. We talked about taking a scan on Sunday. There's some verses that slap you on the side of the head. You're like, man, that's a verse I don't like reading because it gets me every time. And somehow I can't seem to get better or overcome on that. So last week we talked about lying and all of that stuff. And here we go again. And what I will say is by the time, if you start something small, by the time you get to David and Bathsheba, it's not so big a jump. Like if you see David as this holy, holy person that suddenly went to Bathsheba, it's like, how did we get from here to here? But if you trace back David's journey to not multiplying horses and wives and concubines and all that stuff, and this way once you tell a lie, you have to be really smart, right? You have to, if you tell the truth, you don't have to remember what you said. But if you tell a lie, you have to be like, wait, who was there? What did I say? And how am I going to get out of this? And sometimes you have to think, you have to be really, really smart to lie a lot and get away with it, right? It's like if you ever watch those mysteries on TV, not the like, what is it, Dateline. They catch you in a lie, it's over. And then it just gets silly, like to the point of you just contradicted yourself 8 times. David, again, he's been fabricating stories, and in chapter 21, look at what it says. David went to the city of Nob. Now, tabernacle and priests used to be at Shiloh. It's gone to the city of Nob. So where the priests are, there is the tabernacle. Remember, the tabernacle is not the temple. The temple comes with Solomon. It's the tent. It's where the priests are. And so there's this, who did he first try and find solace with? Samuel, right? And then he found it in Jonathan. But now he realizes Saul is coming, and so he goes, and where does he go? He can't go back to the palace. He can't go back home. He can't hang around with Jonathan. And so in this amazing moment, you feel like he's doing the right thing. He goes where the tabernacle is. He goes where the Lord is. He goes to speak to a priest. David's problem is he doesn't really know who to trust. Because it's politically savvy for people to be on Saul's side. Like, it's dangerous when people have something to gain by being against you. They have to be really for you not to do that. Does that make sense? If it behooves you to come against somebody, then more than likely you're going to be tempted to do that. It's kind of suicide to stand up for David, because anyone, and we'll see it, anyone that's seen to be standing for David is going to be public enemy number 1. So David goes to this town, this city called Nob, to see Ahimelech the priest. And so David is on the run. He goes to see, and the ironic thing is, he's gone to see a priest, and yet he still can't tell the truth. He's gone to figure out his life. He's gone to kind of be not in the presence of God, but by the tabernacle and all that. By the presence of God, really. And remember we've been talking about that the Spirit kind of shows you that things are off sometimes? Like I've said on Sundays that the Spirit will show you imposters and things that you need to know. So David shows up and he's on his own. He's been on the run. He's probably a bit disheveled, whatever. And he shows up. He's this great fighter, this great captain of the army. And he shows up on his own. And Ahimelech's response is, he trembled when he saw him. In other words, when Ahimelech saw David, his spiritual intuition was what? Something's off. Something's wrong. That's what the Spirit of God does for you, right? It turns out he should have listened to that. So, this priest, Ahimelech, I never say his name the same way, so just don't worry about that. It's like you're having hiccups or something halfway through it. But this priest kind of honors David, and he isn't for Saul. He isn't even really in any of this. But he gets drugged in. He gets drugged in. David goes to him, and the priest trembles when he sees David. And he says, "Why are you alone? Why is no one with you? Why are you alone, and why is no one with you?" What's the truth to that? What's the truth to that? I'm on my own, and I'm all alone because I don't know who to trust. Saul's trying to kill me. Jonathan can't be here. Samuel can't be here. I've got nobody. You should be able to say that, right? You should be able to say that to a priest. That's the truth. And again, we'll get into it, but before you agree with like telling a lie, David, what he does now, we're going to see, it ends up killing 85 people. By the end of the next chapter, we'll see David confess that that lie meant 85 people. So this is what I'm telling you. This is why it's much deeper than what you say. Because the people who say it's okay to lie in situations like Rahab or whatever, or in a situation where someone knocks on your door and right, I get it. But you see, David told a lie because he thought he was doing the best or protecting. And what he doesn't realize is that 85 people are going to die because of that. What we think is we're going to tell a lie because this is going to save that. But we have no idea what that lie is going to do. Does that make sense? So before you say, oh, in a situation like that, everyone gets why he's lying to a point. Like it's not that hard to understand why he's telling a fabrication. But it's so weird, isn't it, that here's a man after God's own heart. He goes to a priest. He goes to the tabernacles. He goes to the place where God is, and he can't tell the truth. Why is no one with you? Because Saul's trying to kill me. That's the answer. I'm on the run. I haven't done anything wrong. Saul's crazy. He's yucking spears at me. He's yucking spears at Jonathan. He's gone nuts. And then, so what does David say? And again, it's almost like preconceived. He's almost come up with this plan. And by the time you get to Bathsheba, you can see why David's got this deceitful kind of strategy. The king has sent me on a private matter. Saul hasn't sent him on a private matter. Saul wants to kill him. David looks at the priest and says, the king has sent me on a private matter. He told me not to tell anyone why I'm here. In other words, I can't give you much what? I can't give you much information. Because if I try and get you much information, I'm really going to have to lie my face off. And I can't keep up with all that. Why is no one with you? The king has sent me on a private matter, David said. Now remember, Ahimelech from the start thinks this is fishy. There's something going on. You ever thought that, done something anyway, and then look back and said, I knew that from the beginning. He told me not to tell anyone why I'm here. I have told my men where to meet me later. Hold on. There's another lie. In one sentence, he's lied like 4 times. He doesn't have any men. He's about to, but he doesn't have. You know what he's saying? Oh, don't worry about it. The king sent me on a private matter that I can't, it's CIA stuff. I can't tell you. But my men are going to meet me later. In other words, my men are out there, but I've got men. Don't worry about that. You're asking me why I'm alone. Don't worry. I've got men. They're going to meet me later. All of it is false. Now, look at what he says. Now, what is there to eat? He's on the run. Here's where you get deep down into this. Is God ever going to starve David out? Now go back to the premise. David has been anointed king. And once David has been anointed king and God promises that he's going to be king, what does God have to do? Okay, so is there any way that God is going to let him starve out, let alone get killed? There isn't. And I understand that playing Monday morning quarterback and preaching it is far easier than being there. And if I'm out of food, I'm probably not that spiritual. I get it. But so he needs food. But here's the thing. You buy the priest, you buy the tabernacle. How do you get food? How do you get food? Who do you ask for food? Forget the priest. Who can you ask for food from? Who can you ask for daily bread from? Who's going to provide it? God is. So why can't you just pray and say, God, I'm here, I need some. It's almost like, so we get scared, and we have to manipulate the situation ourselves, right? David has to figure out how he's going to eat. Instead of just, okay, so he comes and he says to the priest, I've told my men to meet me. Now what is there to eat? Even in this, he's got himself in a pickle. How many loaves of bread does he really need? Why does he ask for 5? It's not because he's big and huge and just being greedy. Why does he ask for 5? Even in this, you see, once you start something, why does he have to ask for 5? Because if he asks for 1, what's the priest going to say? So he's got himself in a mess. And so he's even like, 5? Because I'm going to take care of me and all those men that aren't really out there. This is David. What is there to eat? Give me 5 loaves of bread or anything else you have. The priest says, we don't have any regular bread. You can read it in Leviticus 24. Remember what was in the holy place? Not the holy of holies, but the holy place. The incense, the lights. But there's this showbread. There's this amazing table, the presence of the showbread. This is so crazy when you figure it out. So in the holy place, before there's a curtain and then the most holy place. But in the holy place, there's the incense, there's prayers, there's the candlesticks, the light. But there's this bread. How many loaves of bread are there? 12. There's 12 loaves of bread on the table for the 12 tribes of Israel. Every Sabbath. Remember God gave land and all of this stuff to the tribes. So with land comes food, right? To the Levites, he said, I'm not giving you an inheritance. I'm not giving you land. I will be your inheritance. It seems like the worst gig. In fact, it's the best deal. And what God does is he constantly makes provision for them. That's why, remember in some of the offerings, when they bring the offerings, some of it you had to burn whole, but some of it was reserved for who? Remember Eli's sons were messing around with it and trying to be greedy and take what. But God had said, look, as a priest, you don't have any other way of functioning lest I what? Lest I step in. Like you're not allowed to provide for yourself. I'm going to provide for you. This is how. As people bring offerings, you take the meat, you do what I tell you to do, but the leftover, the stuff, you can have that. There was all kinds of rules. And so the showbread is just one of the. So on the Sabbath, they put out these 12 loaves of bread. They had frankincense in there that would burn. There's like kind of a way of holy fire. But the bread was there, 12 loaves. And every Sabbath, they would take the old bread and put new bread on. But the 12 older pieces of bread were reserved for the priest. So the priest ate of the bread. Now God's even over that. Like it seems like a week old bread, that's not great. But I guarantee you it was decent. Like God's not feeding them moldy bread saying, sorry, that's the best I can do. But go back. Jesus was the bread of life, right? Do you understand what the bread is saying? The bread is physical provision, but it's way deeper than that. God is saying that whenever they went to the holy place, God was right there. That it's a symbol of his presence. It's a symbol of his fellowship, which is ever being renewed every week. It's not old. It's not stale. It's basically God saying, I'm there. I'm your provider. I want fellowship with you. I've got your back. Jesus is the bread of life. There's so many things that bread is saying. So the bread became important. That bread was meant to remind you of who God was, right? So can you imagine David eating the bread that said everything about God whilst lying your face off? He's literally eating bread that says, God is my provider, God is my provision, God is wanting fellowship with me. He's literally eating the bread and his life is screaming. It's kind of like taking communion and you're way off base. Communion is meant to say all of this stuff about Jesus, and we go out and, right? Communion can become kind of like just so robotic and so like, oh, I've done this 1,000 times. It was only the priests who were allowed to eat the bread. And there's a lot of conjecture about if it was right or wrong to eat the bread, and Jesus talks about it when his disciples are getting in trouble from the Pharisees for eating on the Sabbath. Jesus talks about it. And there's a lot of conjecture whether it was right to eat the bread and whether Ahimelech should have given him the bread, because it was strictly set aside for priests. But you can see this priest. He reveres David. I find it interesting that there's 12 loaves and he's willing to give away 5. The food that it was reserved for him and the priests, he was willing to give almost half away. Which is kind of interesting, right? He wasn't hoarding it like, I'll give you 2. He was in a quandary at the first place whether to give the bread away. And there's an argument where he shouldn't have given the bread, or there's like sometimes compassion rules over a legal rule. Like the Pharisees were mad about Jesus' disciple eating on a Sunday, on the Sabbath, and Jesus had to come, and he uses this example, and he says, you're getting mad at me, but David ate bread when he was hungry, because he knew that the Pharisees wouldn't say anything about David. So Jesus says, it's funny you're asking me this, because didn't David eat the bread? So this showbread, this testimony of God, this kind of, every time the priests would eat the bread, they'd know about God and his goodness and his fellowship and his provision and all of that stuff. And every week, by the way, if God didn't provide, guess what? God was there every week, kind of like manna, but on this table, and the priest would see it. We don't have any regular bread, the priest replied, but there is the holy bread. The priest is like, do I help him or not? Now remember, he started off with not a great feeling, right? But it's David. It's David, the giant conqueror, the man of God. You kind of trust David, right? When David's spinning this tale, the priest believes him. It's David. So he says, but there's holy bread, which I guess you can have if your young men have not slept with any women recently. On these things, they had to consecrate themselves. Part of being, honoring God and being serious about what you're doing. At times they were to remain. Remember in Joshua, when God was going to come and meet them, they weren't allowed to have sex for 3 days. It was like, this is not what you need to be doing. This is not what you need. You need to consecrate yourself. You need to abstain. You need to trust me. This is not the time to be worried about all that stuff. Like, get yourself ready. Forget the outer, like that stuff. Get ready inside, because I'm going to come and meet you. And so the priest is like, look, if your guys are pure and they're in a state to take it, I'll give you the bread. Well, the funny thing is, there is no guys. So to say, my guys are fine, well, of course they're fine. There is no guys. So look at what it says. Don't worry, David replied. I never allow my men to be with women when they're on a campaign. That's probably true. That's probably true. Like if you're on a campaign, if you're in the midst of war, you probably don't want old boy doing that stuff. Yes. Adult married stuff. All right. And he says, look, they stay clean on ordinary trips. How much more on this one? Oh, this is a big trip we got. Like, this is really important. So I would never allow my guys to mess up. It's all a ruse. David simply wants food. And I get that. I understand that. Listen, if anyone wanted food in here, I'm probably one of the leading contenders. I get it. But why? But God, that showbread is a picture of provision, and we're lying. Wouldn't that be weird? Wouldn't it be weird to lying to take communion? Like if you deceitfully take communion, doesn't that kind of spoil it? Like what happens if a church says we only let members, and some do, some let only members take communion? Well, what happens if you go and someone says, are you a member? Oh, yes, sir. You lie your head off and then you take communion. That'd be weird, wouldn't it? Verse 6, so since there was no other food available, the priest gave him the holy bread. And God provides in weird ways, like he allows all of this to happen, obviously. But what I'm trying to say is David would have got fed. He didn't have to do this. He's putting the priest in a bad spot. There was no other food available. And that's almost like a test from God, right? When I read this, those are the things like God is not going to kill him. God is not going to starve him out. And if you start with that premise, then everything else starts to make sense. If you read this story worried that David might starve, might get killed, might not be king, then you're going to make some bad choices. David had been anointed. It takes him years, 10 years or whatever on the run. But he says, the bread, so since there was no other food available, verse 6, the priest gave him the holy bread, the bread of the presence. The bread of the presence. Like, do you catch the irony, right? I'm manipulating, I'm lying, and I'm celebrating whilst eating the bread of the presence. That was for priests. The bread he's eating defies everything that he's kind of struggling with. Yes, he knows God. He's a man of God. He's brilliant. He's a giant. I couldn't even come close to David. But man, he had some rough times. It was placed before the Lord in the tabernacle. It had just been replaced that day with fresh bread, which seems to indicate it's a Sabbath, because that's when they changed it out. So they just replaced the bread, and David takes it. It's kind of interesting. There's no way he ate all 5 pieces, right? All 5. But he has to keep up the ruse. Verse 7. This is what I'm saying. When we take things into our own hands, you have no idea what you're messing with. Like telling a lie because you think that's the best thing to do, you have no clue what's going to happen. Like we assume that telling a lie is going to save us. Not by chance, not by coincidence, Doeg. You don't know much about him, but he's not a nice guy. Doeg the Edomite, Saul's chief herdsman, was there that day for ceremonial purification. Or he says he was delayed before the Lord. We don't really know why he was delayed. Apart from, I'll tell you this, he was there because God had strategically put him there. Have you ever done something? Have you ever done something and realized later that somebody was there that you wouldn't have done it if they were there? David's going to say later, I knew it. I knew that when Doeg was there, I knew I'd messed up. So you got this dude, Doeg, the Edomite, and it says he was Saul's chief herdsman. Okay, that goes back to what I said. If you're Saul's chief herdsman, who are you going to support, Saul or David? Probably so, right? Because if you support David, not only are you going to lose your job, but you're going to get what? I mean, Saul's tried to kill his own son, so let's be honest, like nobody's safe. You come against Saul, you're dead. He's the chief herdsman. Who do you think he's going to be? Listen, whoever gives David up, now no one's going to, but if you give David up, Saul's probably going to reward that. This is my way to climb up the ladder. And so Doeg, in this chapter, we don't know anything about, really. It's the next one. But he's there and he's watching. And don't you know that people love to spin their own narrative? The people don't ask questions. They don't find out what's going on. But when it helps their cause, they will just spin a story. And Doeg is there and he's watching. And it says, David asked Ahimelech, do you have a spear or a sword? Now again, David wants protection. But why is David showing up with no spear and no sword? That's another red flag. You're on this mission. You're on this really top secret mission, and you came out without a spear or sword. You know how many times that happens? If you're on a top mission, the first thing you take. Now, there's a part of that too. Like, no spear, no sword doesn't mean David's dead. But look at what it says. The king's business was so urgent, he lies again. The reason I don't have a sword and a spear is the king's business was so urgent that I didn't even have time to grab a weapon. What the truth is, I couldn't get to my weapons because old boy would kill me. You see how God's put him in? Do you see how God's training David? I've put you in a position where you need food, what you're going to do. I've put you in a position where you don't have weapons, what you're going to do. I've put you in a position where you don't really have many friends that can stay with you. You have friends at point, Samuel and Jonathan. But do you see how God is training David to be king? Like God is training him what to do when you're without absolutely anything but God. I mean, David literally has nothing but God at this point. Where's your men? I don't have any. Where's your friends? Well, I have them, but they're not here. There's 2 of them, at least. And David has no sword. He has no spear. God, you ever think God takes stuff away from you? He thins things out sometimes just to show you. Like whilst there's excess, you don't worry. He's a fugitive on the run with no food, no money, no help outside of God. And so he says, hey, do you have a sword or a weapon? And the priest says, man, I kind of feel for the priest. I think he knows that there's something strange, but he's caught. This is David. I don't think he's scared of David like David's going to kill him. But he honors David. He's heard about David. Everybody knows about David. David's revered. If you went home and said, should I trust David? What are people going to say? Yeah, he's brilliant. And he said, I only have the sword of Goliath, the Philistine, whom you killed in the valley of Elah. You remember that? I have that sword. It's wrapped in a cloth behind the ephod. Take that if you want it, for there is nothing else here. Or there is nothing like that. It's funny how to the naked eye, even when you're telling stories, everything keeps working out, right? It seems like it's working out. I told these stories, I got bread, and now I ended up with Goliath's sword. God's very gracious, but he never condones sin. He never says, oh yeah, don't worry about that. God's answer is, you had to do that. You had to lie, otherwise I was out of options. So now he ends up, look at what he says, give it to me. So David escaped from Saul, and now this is where it gets crazy. David escapes from Saul. What does he have? This is really weird. Whose weapon does he have? Okay, Goliath. Where's Goliath from? Where does David decide he's going to go with said weapon? Gath. This is nuts. You see how I don't understand all of this. But you see how you're on the run. Part of it is Saul's not going to come into Philistine territory to catch me. Because if Saul comes to they're going to kill him. But I don't know if it's crazy, if it's brazen, if it's bold, if it's brilliant. He's going to Gath, where Goliath was from, with Goliath's sword. See remember what happened last time, boys? It's crazy. Who thinks this is a great idea? But he's literally got nowhere else to go. It would have been much better to stay where he was. But he escapes from Saul and he goes to King Achish of Gath, the Philistine. But Achish's officers weren't happy about his being there. Huh. Would you be happy? Who's that? Oh, that's David. What's he got with him? Oh, Goliath's sword. Oh, please come. The officers are like, by the way, the officers know too. The Philistines know there's something fishy here. And he said, his officers, the king's officers, weren't happy about his being there. Isn't this David? And listen to what it says. Isn't this David? What do they say next? Even the godless Philistines knew that Saul wasn't king. Oh, Saul was king. Saul was going to be king for a while. But you understand that the godless Philistines even understood the anointing of David. The Philistines said, isn't this David the king of the land? So they understand David isn't king yet. The only way David is king is why? He's never sat on the throne. He's never led the people. How is he king? He's king because God has anointed him and said, you will be what? And somehow the Philistines grasped that. And maybe that's why they're scared of him. If this is God's man, he's God's king, we don't want a piece of this. What happened last time David fought the Philistines? Nothing good for them. Last time we took this guy lightly, he killed us. This is David, the king of the land. Isn't he the one who people honor with dances, singing? Man, that song keeps biting David. Be careful what praise you want. That praise kills him. Like in lots of ways, not physically. Saul has killed his thousands and David his what? That song keeps like coming back. You can figure this out for yourself. Whether the Lord's good to him and makes him a genius or, this is the kind of crazy situations you get in when you start to tell stories. I told you have to be really quick on your feet, right? You have to. David heard these comments. Again, and I know, again, it's easy to look at this passage and not be involved yourself. What chance did the Philistines have of killing David? David heard these comments and was afraid of what King Achish might do to him. Do you understand where this is problematic? That David has taken himself to the Philistines, and now the men don't want him, they don't like him, they're scared of, it's weird, they're scared of him and he's scared of, what? If God had wanted David dead, why not just do it through Goliath? The Philistines cannot touch David. Again, that's easy to look back at and say, but as he sits there in Philistine territory, how surprised would you be if the Bible said King Achish killed him? And then you went back and read the previous chapters like, what? Hold on, why did you anoint him king? Now, if David commits heinous crimes and sins, like God's very gracious, because remember, Saul lies and he takes the kingship from him. But he treats David different for whatever reason. Not different in the wrong way. But even with Bathsheba, David pays a high price, but guess what? He keeps the kingship. But David is in Philistine country, and he's scared of the Philistine king. What happened to the brave? Like, it's crazy. And so, we've talked about this a few Sunday nights ago, but you know what he does, right? He's scared, so he pretends to be insane, scratching on doors and drooling down his beard. That's what he does. Did God tell him to do that? Did he just do this? I don't know. But I'm telling you, when you start down this path, imagine if it's like, dude, when you start down this path, you're going to have to do all of this stuff. Like I guarantee you, if David was here tonight and say, would it have been less costly just to be straight up? I guarantee you he'd say, yeah. Yeah. I should have just told the truth. I should have just told the priest and trusted God. If Ahimelech wants to mess you up, let him. God will take care of it. So now, you imagine where he's at in life. He's the anointed king, and he's literally acting like a crazy person. Look at what it says. He pretended to be insane. He scratched on doors, and he drooled down his beard. It's not exactly the high point of his life, is it? All he wants to do is what? But here's the problem you have. If you can't get spiritually secure in one place, what happens when you go to the next? Like if David doesn't figure this out in the inner man, no matter where you go, have you figured that? I struggle with this. We all struggle with this. We've got inner man issues, right? No one does. That's awesome. Two people. Two people. One person does. We've got problems, right? And so because we changed jobs because it was all their fault. And we find out, this is crazy. I've had 5 jobs and they're all nuts. If he doesn't get a grip on God, you're just going to have to provide. I've got to tell the truth from now on. He's just going to run into problem after problem after problem. He's going to escape from the king. But if you don't get to, you see what I'm saying? Like if you don't trust God deep down, like or there's a problem. Not that David didn't trust God, but he's struggling spiritually in this moment. If you don't deal with that, it's going to keep resurfacing over and over. I mean, if you don't deal with your pride, how many times is that going to come up? In how many situations? Greed, whatever you want, lust, whatever you want to make it. We've got to get, sin is crouching at the door. We've got to master it. Because getting away from King Achish, yeah, great. I made it away from him. But he still got what? He still got Saul. And the next place from this is a dark cave on your own. And God is very, look, see, this is what I'm saying. If they believe David's insane, maybe this is chance for revenge. Old boy's lost it. He's gone from a giant slayer to a dude that's dripping down his beard. Like, no matter how scared I was of him, maybe now I can take him. He's put him in the worst. I mean, how vulnerable is he at this moment? And what does God do? Let him die? Of course he doesn't. God is going to protect him for the 50th, 100th, 200th time. And look what it says. King Achish said to his men, "Must you bring me a madman?" In other words, the king buys it. God allows him to buy it. God's going to protect David. And the guy says, "Must you bring me a madman? We already have enough of them around here." There's many jokes in that. I'm going to leave that alone. Look at what he says. We've already got enough of them around here. Why should I let someone like this be my guest? And so David's bye-bye. So he's on the run, he's everywhere he goes. Everywhere he goes, he's dealing with the same stuff. And at some point, you've got to get out of this cycle of just tell the truth. I mean, if you could redo this, wouldn't you just say, just tell the truth, will you? Like, there's a cost to taking control yourself. Chapter 22. Man, we're getting through all kinds of chapters. I got to slow down. David leaves Gath, and he escapes to the cave of Adullam. So now you're in a deep, dark cave, bats, all kinds of stuff. God can put you where he wants you, right? If you ask David how it's going in this moment, remember the psalm we did on the Sunday? That's what he wrote it from. Soon his brothers and other relatives joined him there. So now he starts to get people meeting him. Now he's in this cave, and it says, and others began coming, men who were in trouble or in debt or who were just discontented. We talked about that. That's a great bunch of people you want. I mean, think about it. You're on your own, and his brothers and other relatives join him there. I have no idea how they even know about all of this. Like, how do they even know? There's no text messages. It's dangerous. No one can send out a telegraph saying, David's in the cave. This is top secret where David is, right? How in the world does he know that? How do they know that? He's just acted insane. He's had to flee. He can't text them. But this is what God does. He protects. Can God bring you people? Yeah, it might not be the people you asked for. David is sitting in a cave, and all of a sudden his brothers and other relatives join him, and it says, another began coming too. This is really dangerous. Like, now all of these people know where David is. Men who were in trouble, in debt, or just discontented. In other words, the only people that were willing to stand with David are the people at the very end of their rope that don't have anything to lose, that Saul doesn't care about, that they have no other way, no other answer, no other allegiance. I'm in debt, I'm in trouble, I'm discontented. They have no friends, they have no future, they have no prospect. Let's give this one last twirl. Hey, David, you're our man. Now you imagine, put yourself in a cave, put yourself on your own, everything that David's gone through, and you pray, God, would you provide me people? You think this is who he was asking for? Imagine you prayed that and God says, I'll answer that prayer. Oh, hallelujah. Yeah, wait. I'm going to bring you the discontent, the troubled, and the debt. Now, in some ways, they're horrible people to have. But in amazing ways, they're the best people you could have. Why? Because they're going to get to... Now, look, he's not perfect. We figured that out. But spending time around David, for the most part, is going to be a spiritual, brilliant thing for these men. They're going to get to hang out with David. And David is still allowed to minister to people. Like, it's not much good for David in some ways, but it's really good for these discontented people. They're in trouble, they're in debt. And you know, this is part of it. When someone comes to you in trouble or in debt or discontented, and they say, how do we get out of this? You can't tell them, well, we have to make up a ruse. You know what you have to tell them? We're going to stand by God, we're going to stand on God, we're going to do what he tells us, and we'll see where it happens. David, can you save my life? I don't know. But we'll do everything we can to follow God and see where he takes us. Imagine being told, oh, we lie around here, that's how we do it. What? That's how I got into debt and discontentment to begin with, probably, right? They need hope. They need something. And God sends them to David. And 400 people show up. 400. He's trying to... You imagine being on the run, trying to hide from the king, and 400 people now know where your whereabouts are. You see, if you don't trust God at some level, you see how much panic you're going to have now? That these guys are loose cannons. They're in debt. What happens if Saul offers them money? Then they might turn, right? If you're on the run and you're scared of the king, you don't want many people knowing where you are, do you? But God put him in another position of, are you going to trust me or not? How many positions has David been in where it's like, it's God or bust? I either trust you or I don't. Because if you're going to sleep at night being like, I got these 400, you're in trouble. Are you going to bed at night saying, don't worry about tomorrow, I got 400 of these men. They're all good. They're all got my back. We foolishly do that. We trade the promises and the word and the principle of God and we get scared. But then we foolishly say, don't worry, I've got my friend. Don't worry, I've got my money. Don't worry, I've got my whatever. And is it any wonder why the Lord messes with that a bit, just so you realize that's not what you cling to? And there's 400 men come to him. And he goes later, verse 3, in Moab. The Moabites are not good people. Would you let my father and my mother live here under royal protection until I know what God is going to do for me? So he's looking after his parents. He wants to know what God's doing. He goes to Moab, of all places. And he says, would you protect my mom and my dad? Now again, unless ultimately you're really trusting the Lord, this is all really scary stuff, right? Whilst you can do that, you've got to really trust God. Like, you can't trust the Moabites. Read about the Moabites. The king agreed, and David's parents stayed in Moab while David was living in his stronghold. After all of this, what you really need to know on the run is what? What do you really need to know when you're in David's position? What does he need to know? He needs God. He needs God to be there. He needs God to be gracious. And he needs God to still what? To still speak. You see, you don't have to manipulate the situation. When God wants to meet with you, guess what he'll do? He'll meet with you. When he needs to provide, guess what he'll do? When he needs to protect, guess what he'll do? And so David is now, in verse 5, look, one day the prophet Gad told David, hold on, so God is there? Yeah. God is giving you away? Yeah. Yeah. That's what I'm saying. When God tells you, God is telling David what to do. You don't have to make up these elaborate ruses. When I need you to move, move. And a prophet comes and he says, leave the stronghold and return to the land of Judah. Here again, that's a measure of faith, right? Why doesn't he want to go to Judah? Yeah. He felt safer in Philistine country than Judah. And God speaks to him and he says, David, go back to Judah. Huh. How many times is God stretching David? You see, he needs this to be king. And look, you know God likes to stretch you, right? Maybe you go and you say, hey, I'll go to Judah, but please don't let what? What would your one prayer be? If you're a bit anxious, if you're a bit scared, I don't mind going to Judah, but please don't tell who. Look at what it says. Leave the stronghold, go to the land of Judah. So David went to the forest of Hereth. The news of his arrival, and so David does this is David. See, there's so many times where David does what he's told, he's brilliant, and then there's this other side. That's that battle, right? That's a battle we all have. Good angel, bad angel. It's that clash. Like, you could go to court and claim that David is lacking faith, but you could also claim he's one of the greatest men of God there ever was. So it seems contradictory, but that's his life. And look at what it says. The news of his arrival in Judah soon reached who? Okay. So God has allowed Saul to hear the one thing you don't want him to hear. Is God still good? Has God still got your back? Does Saul finding out where I'm at mean I'm dead? God's testing him to the nth degree. Like, if I'm David, I'll go, God, and I honor you, and I'll go because of the prophet Gad, and I'll go to Judah. But Lord, it'd be really, really cool if Saul would just not find out. And it says, the news of his arrival, how long did it take? Whatever soon means. So David went to the forest. The news of his arrival in Judah soon reached Saul. At the time, the king was sitting beneath a tamarisk tree on the hill at Jabbar, holding his spear and surrounded by his officers. The news comes to Saul. Saul's under a tree. He's got a spear and he's surrounded by his officers. Verse 7, and I'll finish. I want questions and praying. Listen here, you men of Benjamin. Saul shouted when he heard the news. Remember, Saul is insecure. Saul is worse than David because Saul will not get right with God. Saul has the spirit has left him. He's dealing with all of that nonsense, all of the spirits and all of that. But he cannot just repent. He cannot just say, I'm sorry. The God has taken the kingdom from him. And all he does is in rebellion and revenge and just total animosity try and kill David. And he's insecure. Saul, you see, when you rebel against God, it's never good. Saul has got to be one of the most miserable people at this point that ever lived. He's king. He has everything the eye could ever want. And yet deep down in his heart and spirit, he's got absolutely what? It's absolute carnage. We could look, you see, you can look at the world and say, they've got everything. Oh, hold on. Having everything doesn't make life good. If you took a miserable test, like how miserable you are, Saul's like maxed out. And here's how I'll explain it. Fight against God and see how happy you are. Saul is miserable. He's he's lost his mind, he's lost his heart, he's insecure, he's like a little child. Look at what it says. Listen here, you men of Benjamin. He's very, very insecure. Saul shouted when he heard the news, has David promised you fields and vineyards? Saul is convinced that what? David has gone and won people to himself. That David has made a promise to people, if you help me with Saul, I'll give you fields and vineyards. Why does Saul believe that's happening? This is really important. I've said this before. But people accuse you of stuff because that's what they would do. It's really, when people accuse you of something you haven't done, it gives you an insight of what they struggle with. The reason Saul believes or manufactures this idea that David is trying to make deals like that is because that's exactly how Saul operates. What'd you say? Oh, of course. But you watch in your life when people say, I know you lied about that. Why are you saying that? Because that's what they would have done. Saul gives himself up. This is Saul's mind. He says, oh, has he promised you fields and vineyards? Has he promised to make you commanders in his army? Saul knows God's touches on David. He's going to have fields and vineyards. David doesn't have that. David doesn't have fields and vineyards. He can promise commanders in his army. He's over somewhat of Saul's army. But this is all pointing to later. Is that why you have conspired against me? How many of Saul's men have conspired against him? None. But he is scared because once you lose the fear of the Lord and once you're not on the Lord's side, you know how much peace you can have? For not one of you has ever told me that my own son is on David's side. Well, first of all, he knows that. He's tried to kill Jonathan for that reason. You're not even sorry. Listen to this. You're not even sorry for me. Here's the king of Israel, and he wants people to come and give him a hug. Yeah, I'm sorry about your son. They're there. I mean, that's kind of funny, but that's what's happening. You're not even sorry for me. Like, you should be weeping for me. Yeah, I should be weeping for you, but in a totally different way than what you think. Think of it. My own son encouraging... Listen to this. This is a total lie. Total fabrication. A total, invention. My own son Jonathan encouraging David to try and kill me. Now, was Jonathan encouraging David? Yes, but not to kill him. Jonathan doesn't want him to kill his dad. And we'll finish here, these last two verses. Look at what it says. Then, remember that dude? There's old Doeg. Be careful what you say because you never know what's going to happen. Oh, I lied to protect myself. Well, you just killed 85 people. Look at what it says. Doeg the Edomite, who was standing there with Saul's men, spoke up. Of course he did. Of course he did. When I was at Nob, he said, I saw David talking to Ahimelech the priest. Here you go. How guilty was Ahimelech? What had he done? The worst thing he did was give bread. And if there's anything he did wrong, he gave bread to David. Ahimelech consulted the Lord to find out what David should do. He gave David food and the sword of Goliath the Philistine. What's Doeg just done? Thrown the priest under the bus. And what's going to happen is, well, we'll see that next week, but Doeg ends up coming against all of these priests, and 85 people will lose their life because Doeg stands and says, Ahimelech betrayed you. Did Ahimelech betray Saul? No. He thought David was on Saul's business. And one lie, well, several lies, has put all of this in trouble. And in verse, this is kind of a spoiler, but you can read it. You'll go home and read it anyway. At the end of chapter 22, do you know what David says? I knew he would tell Saul, I have caused the death of all your father's family. David says, because of what I've done, I know I killed your family. And he tries to make amends because one of the sons survives, and he makes him priest, and we'll go through all that. So much for lying being the best option and protecting, and situationally it's the best thing to do. Does anyone have any questions, thoughts?